Have you ever wondered about life's biggest questions? Like, why am I here? What happens when we die? Or what else is out there? Well, we have, and we love to talk about it. And if you're listening, we think you probably do too. I'm Robyn.
And I'm Karen. And we've spent our lives searching for those answers, and we're seekers just like you.
We'll be talking to some of the most fascinating spiritual teachers, healers, and scientists, and showing you how you can use some of their spiritual practices for yourself.
We'll also be sharing stories of other seekers to motivate you to live your fullest life.
And we'll be translating it all, so the spiritual stuff won't feel so out there.
So if you're curious, get ready to rediscover why we're here together.
As Karen and I continue to seek out answers to life's biggest questions, we are blessed to find others on this seeking journey who are just as curious as we are. And most of the time, these seeking connections come out of the blue. It's like the universe hears us in our own minds, looking for that next right person and serves them right up. They must be putting out their own call as well. For us, the next right person is Elizabeth Furest. She is an energy medicine practitioner, intuitive counselor, reiki master, spirit-to-spirit communicator, and tarot reader. Elizabeth is dedicated to elevating universal consciousness.
She was born with an increased intuitive awareness and a hypersensitivity to energy. Her journey to living authentically and utilizing her gifts to help people live healthy and productive lives by awakening their higher selves and supporting their natural gifts didn't happen overnight and is quite miraculous. She'll tell you all about it, and you'll get to experience Elizabeth in action when she gives Robyn and I a reading.
I had the privilege of actually talking to Elizabeth before, but we didn't get to actually see each other.
Nice to see both of you.
Your story is unlike any that we've heard before. So can you talk about what happened actually in utero that ended up impacting your childhood?
Well, I don't remember anything.
Right.
The experience that I had, so when I started walking was when my parents noticed that I had a discrepancy. And so that's when I was taken to a doctor and had an MRI, and they discovered that I had an in utero stroke. And till this day, they still don't know what caused it. Spiritually, I think things just happen. So we have different experiences, the same way that someone might have an illness that teaches them something, et cetera. And so when I was a very young age, I was just told that this had happened to me, but I believe that it set me up to sense differently as I moved through the world. Because the stroke happened on the left side of my brain, it affected the right side of my body and it weakened the right side of my body. But because it's in utero, and what we know about neurology and brain plasticity is that the brain is able to heal itself and kind of compensate in other ways. So I believe that I really started using more so the right side of my brain, which is more of creativity and intuition and things like that. And so at a very young age, I just remember perceiving the world through sensory perception. I would sense things and how it would make me feel. And the other thing that I noticed too was that like what I would perceive on the left side, like if I touched something that was hot or cold with my hand, the left side, it would feel different than the right. So I was just trying to merge kind of both of these realms, both hemispheres, into creating a more whole experience. But I was just noticing that there's more to something than what it just looks like. And so is it having emotional responses to things? So as a young child, I would, I could go into kindergarten and someone at another table, I could sense like if they were feeling joy or if they were feeling sad, or I could just pick up tidbits of information. And I just remember my mom at a young age being like, where did you hear that? Or how did you just make that up? And then the phone would ring and it would be the same message. So I was able to have this perception where I was just in the world receiving information in a different way. And I would say that most adults would say that it was highly imaginative, but I also think that our imagination is our intuition. And so the more like in my adult life, when I think about that, I think about how Einstein always said that imagination is more important than knowledge. And it's because it has unlimited possibility there. So like the way that I moved through the world was like, if I could create something in my mind's eye, I learned later on that it's because it can be true. I didn't know any other form of perception or anything. It was just how my way of moving through the world. And I didn't even realize it was as holographic as it is until my adulthood. But as a child, it was just extremely colorful. I had a range of emotions that maybe other kids didn't have the depth to, or weren't able to process, but I couldn't really understand things totally logically. Like I really struggled in math because I was like, well, in algebra, like why would you put letters and numbers in the same thing? Like that doesn't make any sense to me. But I could move through the world with emotional intelligence. And so it wasn't until later on that I realized, oh, that might be a little different than how other people perceive information.
Wow. Wait, can I also say, did you see a crazy orb just go down in front of, like, I just saw.
I'm sure you did. And I'm sure it happened.
Oh my goodness. I can't wait to replay that. But you just had something just literally come in front of your, like,
oh my gosh. Yeah.
Elizabeth, can I just ask you a little bit about your parents during this time and when you went through this experience, how they guided you through it? How did you know it was okay to have this perception? You know, some parents I know teach their children not to see those things, or at least not to look and articulate those things. What was your experience with your parents? Was it different?
Well, I think it was new for them too. And luckily I have parents who are, compassionate and supportive. And even to this day, my mom will say, like, you give me a different like spin on things or look at things through a different lens. I went through physical therapy for 15 years as well. I think that we shared the challenges and the joys. And I think also when you are a hypersensitive child, I mean, with that, it wasn't always like fabulous. Like I would have tantrums too, like things that I couldn't, because I couldn't understand why I would feel so deeply or why something would come over me. I didn't know how to manage extreme emotions, but luckily I was kind of just held in a space where it was okay, or they were just doing the best that they could to just try to understand it with me. So we were just kind of in it together.
I feel like you were surrounded by the right people to nurture this, even if it sounds like they weren't necessarily spiritual.
And that's what I was asking about your parents. Were they at all spiritual, or were they just really methodical about teaching you that who you were was just fine no matter what you were?
Yeah, I didn't really necessarily come from a spiritual or religious background. I think they have their own beliefs, in place, but it wasn't like, this hasn't come from a very deep tradition in my family, or, I don't say like, oh, it's in my lineage. I also think we choose our soul family, or our soul. I think Ram Dass calls them our pods, our soul pods. And, we choose our pods to some degree. And I think that, I was born into a family that maybe this journey wasn't totally in their awareness, but we're helping each other grow in that awareness. I think that's how soul contracts work, that we are placed with people that are our catalysts for growth.
Take us to the next level then. So you got through an amazing childhood. It sounds like I would have loved to have been a teacher in your classroom just to see how you were responding to all of that. But now take us through to high school and after that. Were you connected with your soul's journey at that point as well? Did you identify it as that, or did you just have one of those typical high school and college experiences?
I don't think it was typical for me. I think a lot of the times I would have these moments where I felt isolated. I think I had more clarity in high school than a lot of people. Like I knew what my interests were, where I wanted to go to college. I was very clear on my path, but I also then felt kind of misunderstood as well. But that was okay, because that allowed me to find those more meaningful connections when they did pop up, because it was other people who were also highly sensitive, and learning that it's okay, and not to dampen this part of ourselves, but to step into our power. I think that when we live authentically too, we attract, it's like a magnet. We attract like attracts like. So we attract other people that have similar interests or on similar paths. And that's how we walk each other home. We're all on this journey together. Yeah.
I mean, you are speaking our language.
It is more about energy and how that energy either connects us or reflects us from each other. So it sounds like that's what you were able to find when you were going through college and high school to kind of ground you.
So I went to Emerson College in Boston, and that's where I graduated from. But when I graduated from high school, I had honors. I played sports. Took AP classes. I was class president and all of this stuff. And I got waitlisted twice. And so freshman year, I went to a school in Ohio that I didn't totally want to be at, but I wanted to transfer out. And that's where I kind of started learning and using the power of prayer, or the power of intention and manifestation, because I'm like, there's nothing in my realm that I can do to change anything. I don't know why I'm getting waitlisted at this school. Like I couldn't get better grades. I couldn't be more than class president. Like there was nothing else I could do. And I just had to learn to get out of my own way and say, okay, this is happening for a reason. I'm where I'm supposed to be for a reason. I grounded through that experience, just made it the best that I could be. And then eventually I got in for the spring semester sophomore year. I just knew intuitively, like that's where I wanted to be, but that was when my tools started opening up of like, don't get disappointed. Don't say this is never going to happen, because it did. It just was, I had to surrender to the timeline, to the outcome, to how it looked. And I still ended up graduating from there. That was when I just had to kind of surrender and say, everything that is meant to be mine is already mine. And I have to relinquish how it's packaged, how it's going to come in, what that timeline is. And when I started trusting that and letting go of my attachments, using the law of detachment, things started just flowing to me. And then I would just really learn like what is meant to be, which people say all the time. But I think it kind of glosses over disappointment sometimes of like, oh, if it's meant to be, it will be. But it's actually true. And it's to not lose faith as you're going through it. It's not how we want it to look like.
Exactly. I know. We all get so attached to things being exactly what we think it has to be in our head. It's usually so much better than you ever even imagine.
Always better. In all of that I do, I always see that it's better on the other side. So if someone is in the worst situation, like I remember freshman year of college being like, I'm having those thoughts, like I'm not going to be able to get out of here. Why? Like I felt like I was being punished. And then I realized like, okay, I'm not a victim. It's happening for a reason. Let me just let go of all of this. And of course, that's when it all came in.
I'm so glad you're bringing this up, that it is really normal to go through what you went through. And it forced you, and in your case, it forced you twice to really be like, why is this happening? How do I get to this place where I think I'm supposed to be?
How did you know this? Like, I mean, you're so young right now, but how did you have that inner wisdom? Like the law of detachment, I've heard of law of attraction. I've never honestly heard of law of detachment, which is an amazing thought within itself, letting go of how it's going to happen. But how did you know at this young age, and where do these tools come from?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think that we're all born with wisdom. Well, what I know is that we're energetic beings. So we're photonic beings. We have light in our body. And then having studied the laws of energy, we realize energy can shift. Energy can change. And when you don't like an outcome or a situation, that we have the power to change it. Our external experience will start being different when we start shifting within ourselves. So at a young age, we all have a voice that's inside of us. And I think it's really clear. And I think we always have that, but I don't think it's necessarily fostered. And then we live in a society where it's drowned out through other noises. We live in a Pavlovian society of like, you could be in deep thought, but if your phone goes off, like forget it. You better respond to that bell. I think at a young age, I just listened to that voice no matter what. I just listened to my intuition.
As you said, we're all born with wisdom and we're all born with this inner voice, yet nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about it. And I do hope and I believe that we are, as a society, starting to talk about it with our children. So I feel like the more parents or teachers, for that matter, that start to acknowledge the inner voice, then the more then we can talk about intuition and so forth at a young age.
Exactly. I mean, we're born as human beings, like the concept of being, and we're in a society of very action-based and not being, where there's a deep emotion of guilt, I think, attached to just being. And I believe that the potency of a lot of magic and our own intuition comes from in those being states of dropping into meditation, of looking at that little grain of sand, of, children having imaginary friends. Because I don't know if they're truly imaginary friends or if this is how children are communicating with spirit, or, if they're communicating with animals or trees or, whatever they're having in that rich experience. But we live in this time where people are saying, oh, don't do that. Or, better bring you to a psychiatrist or psychologist. There must be something wrong with you. And I completely disagree that it's very rarely an actual mental illness. And we've completely stripped away the the concept of having agency and having sovereignty to just be creative spiritual beings. And that's where I try to foster people into retrieving that part of them and then flourishing with whatever those natural gifts are.
I love how you use the word foster.
And I think adults can tap into it too. It's just truly listening to ourselves and then recognizing that when doubt comes up or fear comes out, those are just biological programs we have. We need fear for survival. But now we live in a time where if it kicks in, we get to use the power of deciphering and saying, should I really be afraid right now? Oh, wait, no, hold on. This is just fear coming up to protect me. But I have the agency to override that fear and go for whatever it is I want to go for. And so, we all have that inner compass or that guidance system, and it's not logical, but we live in a very logical matrix, which is now collapsing. So I think the work is now, or the messaging now for people is like, tune in and listen to that no matter what.
When did you know that you could help others with spirituality and with your gifts?
Before I moved to California, which was in 2017, I was working in Detroit during Detroit's bankruptcy. And one of the jobs that I was in was at a hospital. And the other job that I was in was writing grants for a nonprofit. And I just remember at both places, people would stop by and ask me for my advice, ask me what I thought on something, or they would want, and I would get great performance reviews about my work. And my boss would always be like, but there's too much chit chat, like too many people coming by to visit you, too many people like needing help. And I was like, man, I could do this for hours, like talk to people and give them advice or tell them what I'm sensing. And so it kind of opened up that way. And then I was really fortunate at the nonprofit that I was working at that she was our director of development, and she was very spiritual and had read a lot of like Abraham Hicks and when we would write these grants, competitive grants to bring money in, for Detroit public schools or make art programs free or whatever, she would be like, well, let's hold the intention that our grant gets funding. We would get the funding. We would get these programs off the ground. And I'm like, it's because we're energetically charging the work because it's helping other people. And so our intention is to heal. And so that energy is being brought in. So she was just allowing, it was kind of in that having her as my boss. And she would just say like, you're really intuitive, you could do this, and she just kind of gave me the permission to let all of these pieces sort of integrate. So even though, yes, it was my day job, it was like going into like work magic every day.
Well, so then what happened to spark the move to the West Coast?
Yeah, so that's actually really interesting because I just feel that we're placed in places for the exact amount of time or the experience that we need to be there. So when I was living there, for a while, I was like, I'm going to stay here for a long time. Like, I'm really comfortable here. I like my job, all this stuff. I was like, I even told that same boss, I was like, I'm going to work here forever. And she used to be like, well, probably not forever. Like, you'll probably outgrow it. And I was like, no, forever. And then I realized like, it was just something that as we grow, change is inevitable. And so I just felt intuitively like, okay, I'm being pushed out of this. There's more for me. My skills started opening up. I started getting all of these synchronicities. And so, of course, this is where I started practicing the law of detachment too, because I was like, I'm not selling my house. I was like, I like it here. I was kind of getting in my own way. I actually kept hearing clairaudiently intuition medicine. And I was like, I don't know what that means. I'd never heard it before. And it just kept like popping up. And so one day I Googled it, and then I find out there's out here in Sausalito, the Academy of Intuition Medicine, which was founded by Dr. Francesca McCartney. And surprisingly, when I went on the website, she's also from Detroit. So all those synchronicities like started then. And so I was like, oh, this program really interests me. And then I was like, okay, that was like the first nudge from the universe. And I was like, well, I don't know though. I don't know. I'm not going to leave Detroit. But then I had new neighbors move in, and we were talking over the fence one day, and I was like, well, there's this program in California, and it's kind of aligned with what I want to do. And I was like, but I don't want to sell my house. And my neighbor's like, well, if you do want to sell, my sister's looking to buy. So it all just kind of kept going. And then sure enough, I sold the house by owner to her sister because it's undeniable from spirit. Like, we're putting everything in place for you to make this happen. That's what I did. And like drove out west with my dogs and like had already planned to go to the orientation for the program, like had already submitted an application. And I was like, my commitment to myself was like, I did the grant writing thing. I was in service to the capacity I could be in. And then it almost was this feeling of like, my work here is done. I completed the assignment. It almost felt like there was an expiration across the board. Like I wasn't meant to be in my house anymore. I was meant to hand that over. And it was just so seamless that it was undeniable. Flying by the seat of my pants, but I did it. And I came out here, and the Academy is a really great program that helped me hone my skills. And then of course the community that I got access to, and it's just been incredible.
Thank you for sharing that story, because I hope that others are listening, because I do think most people get those feelings of, I'm not supposed to be here anymore. I'm not supposed to do this job anymore. And they ignore it, because sometimes, as you said, you loved your house. Like you really weren't necessarily looking to move.
Yeah.
But you can't deny whether you're hearing that, or it's really a thing for most people, it's a feeling, right? Yeah. And so I just hope people are listening. I know that happened with both Karen and I in different parts of our lives so far. If you pay attention to it, and then you start to see those synchronicities, as you talked about, then you know you're on the right path, right? Like we all come in here with some sort of plan, and there's all these different ways that we can get sidetracked from that plan, and then, as you were saying too, before, even with college, that all led you back to the same place once you started paying attention. But I really want people listening to or watching to hear that, because we do what we're doing is so that we can help others reconnect to why they're really here. And that starts with paying attention to what you are feeling.
I just want to add on top of that, because I was just dying to say it, as Robyn said it too, is that you made it sound like a really easy thing to do. Like listening to it, it's like, oh yeah. But we all know, like that was a big major deal, like packing up your stuff and actually making that leap of faith.
It is that steadfast commitment to that feeling. And so when we get scared, it's because our soul's going, wait a minute, are you sure? And what I've seen almost across the board in this work is that it's when we take those moments and we're like, hold on, comb through the fear, comb through everyone else's thoughts, everyone else's things, and get back to the original soul message and say, am I still being pulled to this thing, even if I don't know what's on the other side, and following that anyway? Because what I've noticed is people are afraid of themselves. Spirit wants to know that we trust ourselves, that we are listening to that voice, that we are asking for guidance and knowing that we're going to be supported, but they don't necessarily give us the little crumbs because they want to know that we're going to do it all on our own. And then on the other side, they're going to make it beyond your wildest dreams. It's not that it's not going to be hard. It doesn't mean it's not going to be scary, but it's kind of like moving that stuff aside and be like, get out of the way. Fear is going to be there anyway. But fear goes in that container, and I'm going to go on this path. Spirit gives us everything that we need, just not everything that we want. That's where we get the greatest lessons. That's when we have the greatest growth trajectory. I will always challenge people, like, if you're unhappy with your job, like, don't stay in it forever because it's safe. Like push yourself to that dream thing, even if that means cutting back for a year or making a move or changing other things, because it's going to pay off when you follow what you're meant to do. I've never seen it not work.
We need to hear that message.
Yeah, I'm going to keep replaying that one.
I agree.
Okay, so tell us more about the Academy. Tell us about the experience. What is it that they teach there?
So the Academy is a really unique program. So Dr. Francesca McCartney, who I mentioned before, I think she founded it back in the 80s in Sausalito. And they'll say the program naturally attracts people who are highly empathic, or in the Myers-Briggs, a lot of INFJ personality types. The program allows a safe container to explore sensitivities. It teaches energetic tools about grounding and being in present time, and how to read the aura, and how to read energy systems like acupuncture meridians and the chakras. But ultimately, it's designed to give yourself the tools to heal yourself. And so the program really does help us to use our intuition, heal ourselves, have healthy boundaries, healthy relationships, an understanding of, is my experience the story that I'm telling myself? Is my experience truly mine? Or is it a narrative that's playing out? Is it someone else's story? Is it my ancestors? Is it from a past life? And it allows you to just kind of sit with all of that and then choose what you want in this life and move it forward, regardless of anything else.
Sounds like we all need a little,
I agree.
a little of that. Is it like a typical school where there's a semester and you concentrate on certain subjects and then you graduate? Is that how it works?
Yeah. So it starts off with, it's either like a healing modality or meditation, but basically you learn how to be present. The present moment is actually where we're able to co-create. So when we talk about the power of manifestation, if you're present and you're in that law of detachment of like, I'm doing everything I can, I'm just wishing for the best, you're actually co-creating to a better outcome for that future.
Well, and then from learning all of that, do you then learn Reiki or other ways of using your intuition? I mean, are those all part of the program?
It starts off as, heal or heal thyself. So it's always about how you can understand yourself, do introspective work, do clearing work. So yeah, Reiki is an energy that can be used as a universal energy for healing. You're given those tools, but then it does build on that of like past lives, soul contracts, like why we have the relationships that we have, being able to work with other frequencies to help clear your own energy systems and to clear other people. Because sometimes, we come in with a lot of imprints. We pick up a lot of stuff. And so in present time, you might be carrying something. If you have a fear, I met this girl once who had a fear that she was claustrophobic, but nothing had happened in this life to make her feel claustrophobic. She'd never been stuck in a cave or in an elevator or anything like that. But in the academy, you can learn how to scan where that's being held in someone's energetic body. And for her, she had a past life where she was entrapped or didn't feel like she could get out of a situation, and she was carrying that imprint. So we were able to find it, release it, refill her, have her spirit recognize this story isn't playing out. It's a memory, but it's not this lifetime. Fill up that space with the goodness that's present time of her own energy. That imprint had moved out of her field and she was no longer experiencing claustrophobia. And so many times we're holding on to stuff that's really not even true. It's just so deep in our programming. It's an incredible program, and they do offer online classes.
So Elizabeth, what did you walk out of that academy experience with? What did it teach you specifically, and have you applied that now into what you're doing?
I actually started believing in myself from the time I was born until like through college and even after. I wasn't necessarily sure that I even had gifts. It was just my way of moving through the world. And I kind of just assumed that everyone had it too. And we're all at just different points of our awareness and how we experience them. But the academy really helped me to step into my own power, be like, okay, I do have natural gifts. I can be in service to others. And ultimately, like, I can heal myself. The academy taught me that I could live in a realm of unlimited possibility.
That's so inspiring. I never even heard of this place.
So how would you describe the energy medicine work that you do?
I start by asking people what their intentions are, if there's something that they've been trying to manifest, or if there's been blocks that have been coming up. And sometimes people don't even really know. It's just like they get stuck with something, or they feel like they just need a clearing. And so the way that I work is an integration of all the different modalities that I learned at the academy, but I will be looking at someone to see, is there information stored in the chakras? So any of their energy systems that's holding them back? Is it a pattern that's stuck in their mind? Are they on a loop? Is it something that's playing out? Maybe that's ancestrally. And then I'll be looking to if there's any weaknesses in their auric field. So the energy field, our luminous field that surrounds us. If there's anything stored in the body that could be holding them back, but I can also pick up on situations or the soul contract. So different relationships that they might have, or the energy of a home or a workplace. So I try to look at everything that's happening in their field and seeing like, oh, do we have to move out other people's energy? Do we have to break a pattern here? Or is there an emotional block that's recreating a trigger for them? You can ask that person receive the healing that their spirit's ready for, and they will receive what they need. A lot of times we're holding on to old memories, old feelings, other people's gunk. And so I just move that out and replace it with your present time healing energy. And that usually it gives the person the clarity and the feeling of groundedness and safety to just say, I can be myself and I am whole, even if I'm not perfect. So I don't want to change anyone or change what their path is meant to be, but my intention is to put them in their highest and best self at any given time, and then give them the tools to also heal themselves and the ability to believe in their own magic.
Well, and then let's talk about your intuitive counseling, because I was grateful to already have had a session with you, which really led us to today, because I was so blown away. How do you talk to spirit, and how do you feel these sessions can help somebody?
Well, there's a lot of different things. So I don't just have one way that it comes in. I feel on a multitude of levels. So sometimes I'll hear messages. Sometimes I'll feel it. Sometimes when I'm working with someone, something will show up in their field, like a symbol or a color, or I might get a word that comes in. In an intuitive counseling session, generally people are coming to me with stuff that's going on in their lives, either personally or professionally. And I tap into their field to say, look at if there's any limiting beliefs, or asking information to come in as truth. Because a lot of times too, I think that we feed ourselves all this other information that we need to sift through and say, what's actually going on here? We are spirit. Everything is spirit. And so it's not like a relationship that I have and then spirit's over there and like we're in cahoots with one another. It's all around us. And so I look at it as like spirit to spirit communication with that other individual. And so in an intuitive counseling session, I'm showing up in the level of my own intention and integrity as a practitioner and seeing what's coming up for them. And then through that information, I'm giving them the guidance that I hear is from their highest self. So not the ego and not the stories that they might be telling, but I'm really just looking a tiny bit higher than that and saying, okay, what is their truth? And let's get to that.
I feel like you're a translator for their soul.
Yeah.
In many ways, right? Like you're picking up on energy and guidance, but you really are translating a lot of the answers that are already within.
I'm an advocate for them to trust themselves. Of course, there's free will and they can do whatever they want. But then oftentimes if they keep doing what they want and it's not with their soul, they stay in the same patterns.
What I love that you're doing in addition, so a typical counseling session that somebody would go to would do some of these things, right? Mm-hmm. But I feel like what you're giving that person is not only that tapping into their own energy and helping them sort of clear those things, it's like a 3D therapy. Mm-hmm. It's not just kind of talking through the issue and maybe looking at all the opportunities that they have, but you're seeing it from a soul level as well as maybe from a karmic level, the things that they may not even have any remote idea are there and blocking them. And that could continue to do so if they didn't clear it and recognize that.
Yeah. And I think it's really hard to see ourselves. I think it's hard when, to make major life decisions. I always say that when we are on the point of expansion or stepping more into our power, of course it's scary. Any big transformation, so sometimes when fear is coming in, it's actually an indication that you're leveling up. It's like a video game,
Oh, that's a good analogy. That's a really good analogy.
Wow. Yeah, you're on level 2, you want to be on 3, you're collecting all the coins, and then it's like you make it, and level 3 is going to be scary, but even if you fail, you still made it. The universe wants to help us. It's just, they're going to drag us through things that are uncomfortable to force us to grow.
I know for me, or in my session, when it comes to like even my ancestral lines, right? You're like, you came in here and you are representing this. Mm-hmm. And in many ways, I actually feel like I know some of that, but to hear someone else who I trust say that and coming out of not knowing me at all. And to me, getting that kind of guidance from someone who doesn't know you, doesn't know your whole story, that will help propel you to move forward with more confidence.
That's all I'm really here to do is hold that space for people. So whether they're ready for it or not, the spirit will make the transformation. I'm here to nudge you along. And sometimes people say, I've never had a reading, or I'm afraid to be looked at energetically. And things only come up that the spirit's ready for.
And what I love that you're doing, Elizabeth, is that you're reminding people that they are not just a body here having a human experience. It's not the should, it's not the resume if it's a job that they want to take. It's more at a soul level. That's the gift that I think you're really giving people.
So many people have lost their jobs and they're looking for ways to make ends meet. But if you've always been a great acrylic painter, maybe this is the time that you do your paintings and, showcase them somewhere, because those are your authentic gifts. And I feel that when you are in alignment with that, you're going to get the opportunity to show your work. You're going to be able to launch a website. You're going to get the following. You're going to call in what's already yours. But it's breaking down these paradigms of you can't make any money if you're a creative. You won't have a career if you're an artist. If you're going to be a poet, well, you might as well do something on the side. But I don't believe that any of those things are true. And I think one of the biggest messages now is how we can support one another from, in all ages to find what those natural gifts are and to just go for it.
Amen.
This is really, I know, so well timed for so many people.
We are such magical beings. I see miracles every day. I see people transform. I see people live beyond their wildest dreams.
We're so fortunate because people are going to be able to see or hear one of your intuitive sessions in action. I'm really excited to share your wisdom. I know you're going to inspire people to both believe in themselves and then potentially also go seek out these different ways of looking at the world. For more information about Elizabeth or to book a session, visit elizabethfurest.com. That's ELIZABETHFUREST.com. You can also follow Elizabeth at Solitary Connection on Instagram. Thank you.